Hi everyone, it's Jenny at JC Cards, and today I'm going to be showing you 5 ways to use foil on your cards. This video is part of Justine Hovey's April collaboration series, where she's teamed up with a bunch of other crafters to create crafty videos to inspire you. If you hop on over to Justine's channel, I've given the link in the description box below, you can check out another few ways that Justine's used foil on her cards. So way number 1 is to use a hot foil system. These are pretty new. There's a number on the market. I'm using the Spellbinders Glimmer system. And these are really easy to use, surprisingly. This is one of the first times I've actually used my machine, even though I got it for Christmas. And I'm going to be showing you really quickly how to use it. So you switch it on at the back. The light comes on. You then wait for that green light to turn on and go solid. You can then add the hot foil system plates and press the timer button. You'll see that green light starts blinking. When it goes solid, those plates are ready to be used with your foil. I'm using iridescent foil here by GoPress and Foil. It is different to the foil you might use in your laminator, so bear that in mind when you're purchasing foil for this machine. I'm using the Everyday Sentiments plates by Spellbinders, which are in their February Glimmer kit. You place your foil pretty side down over the plates, add your cardstock or other material that you're going to be foiling, add your shim and then your spacer plate on top, slide out the platform and then add it into your die cutting machine and roll it through. I like to roll mine through a couple of times. What that does is it applies pressure onto the materials, the plates, the cardstock, and pushes that foil into your cardstock. The cardstock I'm using today is cotton cardstock. It's often used for letterpress, but you can use whatever cardstock you've got in your stash. You can also use other materials with these machines, and details are usually provided in the accompanying leaflets or pamphlets as to what sandwich to use. Once you've rolled it through your die cutting machine, remove the spacer pad and the shim, and then peel back the foil and you're left with a beautiful debossed foiled image. You'll notice these are not quite straight. That's because I'm planning on die cutting them. So just to show you, this is the coordinating die that came with these sentiments, and I've run that through my die cutting machine, and you can see up close here the beautiful shimmery debossed foiling. I'm also going to show you quickly here that they can be also die cut with the thin banner die from Simon Says Stamp. And I'm going to be using these sentiments that I created here on all of the cards you'll see in this video. Now, if you don't have the special plates, don't worry, you can also use your dies. You do this in the exact same way, so once that green light goes solid, lay down your die, press the timer button, and it'll start blinking, heating up the plate, and you add your foil pretty side down once that light goes solid. Here I'm using some sheer pink foil by GoPress and Foil and some blue cotton cardstock, and I've laid down my spacer pad and shim in the exact same way and run it through my machine. You'll find with dies that the image you get is much finer. That's because these are usually used for cutting, but it will not cut your cardstock and you're left with this awesome image. I've used an Altenew cover plate here. There were a couple of places where it didn't quite foil. I think that was due to the uneven pressure being applied from my die cutting machine. Certainly with these larger dies, that is a possibility. You can get around this by adding a few shims of paper to add more pressure. To finish it, I popped up one of the sentiments on foam tape into the center and scattered a few sequins. These are Aspen by Catherine Pooler Designs, and that finishes the card. Elegant and classy, I think you'll agree. My second way is to use alcohol inks. So I'm using Yupo heavy cardstock here. You don't have to use the heavy cardstock. I like Yupo. You can also use alcohol ink cardstock. And I've laid it down in a butcher's palette. This is a metal tray. It's often used for mixing paints. I like to use it because it contains the mess. And I'm adding alcohol ink blending solution all over the cardstock. And then I'm dropping in my alcohol inks. So here I'm using Wild Plum, Indigo and Aqua, which I think are a really nice colour combo, and I often reach for those. And then I'm going to go back in with some more of the blending solution just to help those inks spread around a little bit. Now you want to push around those inks using air. So you can use a hand pump. I'm using the Tim Holtz Distress Marker Spritzer. You can also use straws. I've seen people get some great effects using those. And what you'll find is as the alcohol inks blend together, you get these little veins, just like that one there, which remain a little bit stickier longer than the rest of the card. And those parts you can use foil on. So here I'm using Wow Fab Foil in rose gold, and I'm literally just pushing it down, pressing it into some of those areas where the ink is still slightly damp, and the foil will adhere to it. If you do it too soon, you will just get the ink smearing all over the back of your foil, which happened to me the first time, so just be careful, use your judgment, and it's a bit of trial and error. And what you're left with is this gorgeous, shimmery, marbled background. I made a bunch of these, and you can totally use them just as the background for your cards. Here I'm going to be using the Altenew Mega Hello die and die cutting the panel as well as some pink craft foam, and I'm adhering them together. This will form the focal point of my card. So all that's left to do is pop it up onto a white note card, add a sentiment that we created earlier, and scatter some crystal gems from Nuvo. The third way to use foil on your cards is to use a toner pen. So I'm using the Heidi Swapp Minc toner pen along with this stencil from Alexandra Renke, and I've attached the stencil and secured it down directly over some white Nina Solar White cardstock. I'm then tracing the image with the toner pen. It's a little tricky. At first I thought my pen was dried out, but actually what you need to do is push the nib down, and that keeps the ink flowing. So you just need to do that a few times. And I thought it was quite novel to be actually using a stencil to stencil, you know, like we used to do back in the olden days. And then all you need to do is lift up the stencil and you're left with a really cool image underneath, which once dry can be foiled. You will need to use heat to apply your foil. I'm using this amazing Deco foil, rainbow shattered glass foil. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I will be honest, this was the first time I'd used my toner pen. I had no idea if this was going to work, but when I lifted it up, wow, it did. It looked amazing. There were a couple of places where I didn't quite get enough toner pen, but it's hard to see, and I literally just popped up one of our sentiments over the top to finish the card. My fourth way to add foil to your cards is using bonding powder. So I'm using the Aztec background by Erin Lee Creative, and what we're going to be doing is using bonding powder, which is very similar to embossing powder. What it does is it creates a sticky surface on which to adhere your foil. So I'm using embossing ink, this is Wow embossing ink, to ink up my background. I've got a panel of the same navy cardstock I used earlier, and I'm pushing it over the background stamp. You can of course use your MISTI or stamp positioning tool to get the same impression. And then we're going to be adding this Wow bonding powder over the top. It will adhere to the embossing powder. I did use a powder tool just to make sure I didn't get any powder sticking where I didn't want it. And then I'm going to heat it up with my heat gun. It will go clear when it's been heated. I've done a video that I will link to here where you can use this technique without a laminator or Minc machine, but for this version I'm going to be using my Minc, and I'm running it through with a Deco foil from Brutus Monroe in Silver Sketch. And look at that, absolutely gorgeous. And you can do this with any of the stamps in your stash because the bonding powder works exactly the same way as embossing powder. And to finish, I just added a rose gold foiled sentiment. The final way to add foil to your cards is using Minc Reactive Mist. This is a clear sticky medium that when dry is heat reactive with foil. And I like to use it by spattering it over my cardstock. You can also spray it using stencils or just spraying it onto cardstock. If you don't clean those stencils or anything this touches within about a minute, I'm exaggerating a little there, it will stick like concrete. Ask me how I know. So once it's dried, it will go clear. I recommend for this technique leaving it to dry overnight. I was making this video, so I left it for only about 3 hours, and there were a couple of areas that hadn't quite dried. and what happens is it squashes down when it's not quite dry. But I still love the effect. I love it. I use the same Brutus Monroe foil as we used before. All it needed was a die cut. I'm using a die from My Favourite Things and popped up on foam tape with one of the sentiments I created earlier. And that finishes all 5 ways that I'm showing you how to use foil on your cards. If you haven't already, be sure to head on over to Justine's channel and see the other ways she's using foil on her cards as well. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I really want to thank Justine for inviting me along to collaborate with her. I'd love it if you'd subscribe to my channel, and here's a couple of other videos you also might like. Have an awesome day. Bye!